So let's watch this one. You are wrong about what a second-person video game is. So first person is like you see to the other person. Third person is the camera behind. So what would a second person game be? Tell me about it. By Jam to Go.
Do you ever feel like you're being watched? You all know what a first-person game...
Okay, actually I know. Actually it's pretty easy, you know? Like a second-person game would be that so you're viewing a character through another character. Let's say that's following this character, and you are actually playing that character that the guy is seeing, but only like, you know, far away from this guy's vision, right? That would be a second-person game, no?
And a third-person game looks like, but there's been some debate about what a second-person game would look like. The current consensus on the internet is that it would be from the perspective of another NPC looking at the main character.
Is that wrong?
But the more I looked into this topic, the more confused I got. I've been prototyping a game with a digicam aesthetic. And in my last video, I mentioned that using a shaky cam while in the third person made it feel like someone was following you around with a camera. A few people commented that I should actually try that out. It would be a second person camera.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Another character looking at the player. So I added an NPC that follows you around, stuck a camera onto their head, and this is terrifying. It feels more like I'm being chased. What happens when they lose sight of the player,
interesting, though.
Should I switch back to a first-person view? What if there was a way that I could keep it second person? I decided to make a grid of CCTV cameras that switch depending on where the player is located in the map.
But then this is like, if this is a second-person game, there's ton, right? Like any game that doesn't have a fixed camera to the player, you know, so like 2D, side-scroller and stuff like that, it's kind of a second-person game. It's not a person, it's arbitrary, you know, camera following you, but
really fun to navigate like this. It's like a Resident Evil game with the fixed camera perspectives, but without the tank controls.
Second person after watching this.
Still second person? Do security cameras count as another character looking at the player?
Not quite.
I put up a poll in a bunch of different places. One to determine what person perspective the NPC following you camera is, and another one for the security cameras. The results were that the following person is a second person point of view, but the cameras were just a diegetic third person point of view. And
yeah,
I disagree with all of you. I thought security cams should count as second person.
Why?
What if I gave them names?
Okay,
Are
but
the characters now?
That's
Why
not
does
the
it
point.
have to be a different character looking at the player character in order to be second person?
Ah, okay, I see what you mean.
Wouldn't that be fourth person? Who are these people? I think there's some confusion between linguistic perspective and camera perspectives. The videos I've seen on YouTube all start by mentioning the person perspectives as I, you, they, and then map them onto camera perspectives. First person is from a character's point of view. Third person is a external camera. And second person is, well, everyone has a slightly different take.
Yeah.
The most popular video on the topic by Nick Robinson mentions the mission in Driver San Francisco.
That's probably the video I was talking about. Okay, so I was not talking about third person, I was talking about second person. I've seen this video like, or maybe one like this a couple years ago.
You're viewing yourself driving a car from the perspective of another car chasing you.
Yeah,
it's a
yeah.
Great game, by the way. I have a rare Steam copy from 2012. Another YouTuber, Hoovy, thinks that the second person is when you're screen peeking in Call of Duty. In this case, you're looking at you from the perspective of another player. This one is fun. It's something I used to do with my friends in Modern Warfare 2.
I guess it counts in a sense.
Allowing screen peeking. But in both of these cases, the person being looked at isn't really you.
You know, that would make for, I don't know if it would work, but like some kind of like competitive shooter, not competitive, but like some kind of shooter game where you don't play yourself. Like everybody is seeing the vision of another player, but they can't move the character that they see. Okay, wait, I'm getting confused. So yeah, they can't move the character that they see. They have to wait for like the player whose vision they're in to actually come across their own character to be able to know where they are standing and try to move to shoot the camera per se. Okay, actually that sounds like that would be a mess. Something like that. There's something there.
Just a character that you're controlling. You're not John Tanner. You're not John Duty. Other YouTubers came up with second-person perspectives that are actually looking at themselves using VR goggles. Ryan Trahan had a video where he tried to live in third person with a camera behind him on some contraption. In his follow-up video on a second-person camera, he made a camera that's pointed at his face, like that camera in Minecraft. Liam Thompson decided to attach a camera to his dog and then looked at himself from the dog's perspective. And I think they're all wrong. None of these are really second person. Yeah, this is a beef video.
I mean, I was gonna say, like, I get what he means, but also I don't think this video wrong yet, because this is clearly like a concept that's not established. With everybody still trying to figure out what it would be like. So there isn't really a wrong or right per se. Like, we can think of it however we want in the end.
I'm beefing with all the
but let's see what you have to say.
I'm calling them out. It's a call out post. We're beefing. Drama alert. YouTubers are beefing. Wait, YouTube. Is YouTube a second person platform? In my opinion, second person needs to directly address the audience. You. Yes, you. I see you. No, go ahead. Keep eating. You got a lot of drinks going on. Why do you got so many drinks? You really need to clean up your desk. The way I imagine a second person camera would be a camera angle that's looking directly at the actual audience. In films, the closest example I can think of is that shot in Evangelion of the audience watching the movie. Or with the Truman Show, the director thought about having cameras installed in theaters playing the film. The plan being that at one point in the film, they would cut to that camera angle of the audience watching the movie to freak them out. It makes them feel like they're being watched, like Truman was being watched. They didn't go through with it, but that to me seems like it would be a real second person shot.
I don't know if I would call it a second person then. So a second person to him is a camera that's watching someone. That sounds more like a multiple other person than a second person per se. Like, why are we going so deep? Wouldn't a second person just be literally a second person looking at the character that you're playing, and so you have to move the character without having the camera, well, you know what I mean, like being looked at from someone else?
Really demonstrate my idea of a second person camera.
Does it mean to be that complicated?
Itself, because I don't have access to your webcams yet, but maybe if I made the screen black. Is your display glossy? Can you see yourself?
I'm too far away from my TV.
Hi. There you are. Despite everything, it's still you. In video games, this could be something like the iToy or the Kinect.
You ever wonder what the bottom of an Avatar shoe looks like? Well, bam! There it is.
Like in Just Dance, when they show you footage of yourself dancing. Or in Burnout Paradise, when it uses the camera to take a candid of you.
What the fuck is it doing? What are you doing? Why was it spying on me?
But is that even right? I don't want to be another YouTuber just adding another take onto the pile of second person takes.
Well, that's what you're doing.
Where does the term first person come from? Well, it's ancient. It's derived from the Latin prima persona, which was derived from the ancient Greek proton prosopon, and that makes sense.
Is it derived from the Proto-Indonesian?
Languages need to develop pronouns early on in their tech tree so that we know who is being talked about. The point of language itself is to share information from one person to another. We need a first person who's going to be the one talking, but they're not talking to themselves, they're talking to a second person who is receiving the information. When the first person is talking about themselves, they use the pronouns I, myself, mine.
A Flash game, it was a shooter, but the point of view is from the enemy. Yeah, that's literally what I was talking about earlier. Like, okay, you'll have to tell me about it. That sounds like an interesting concept. Yeah, if you remember the name, tell me about it.
When talking about the second person directly, they use the pronouns you, yourself, your. But what if we want to talk about someone who's not involved in the conversation? That's the third person, and we use the pronouns they, themselves, their. I know.
Okay, I mean, I see what he's doing. Like, he's really going for the linguistic aspect of it, but it's not supposed to be that complicated. Like, the rules are already established, not that they make sense linguistically, but like third person, you know, a third person view in a game is as simple as like it's a camera following the character but from out of their body, a first person is seeing out of the eyes of the body. Sure, if you go into like etymology of words and language and all that, you might have a different take on it, but you know, I think most people will think of what a second person is based on what we already like have accepted of what a first and third is. So I don't know. I feel like it's getting a bit lost, no? It's a Flash game, I guess it got deleted by Adobe.
I know you already know this, but it's useful to see how this looks all laid out visually.
Observer camera following first person is eye view.
In spoken language, this made sense, and we carried on those pronouns into written language. Now the conversation is happening through the medium of text. So we refer to the author as being the first person and the reader as being the second person. Things got complicated with first person fiction.
Oh yeah, okay. I was gonna say, like, do we do that? Like, when you read a book, usually like it's you know, the character is the first person. Like you, the reader, doesn't count as a person per se, right? But I guess if it's an autobiography, yeah, fair enough. Second person, they'd have no interact because the action of the first person is reciprocated toward the second person.
Though in these stories, the character is speaking in the first person, even though they're not actually the author. We imagine the character as being the first person. It's a more natural way of communicating what a character's perspective is. In plays, we had multiple actors all referring to themselves in the first person. The medium was now the stage and the audience. Plays allowed for a different type of communication that wasn't just spoken language, but body language. You could see the emotions on actors' faces and the actions of their movements. Then, in the late 1800s, a new technology was created that could enhance plays, the photoplay. Now artists could use filmmaking as a new medium, and with this new medium, a new language was developed. Visual language. I mean, paintings were also a visual language, but cameras and editing opened up a whole new field of what you could communicate. Psychologist Hugo Munstenberg wrote about this in The Photoplay, a psychological study. In it, he talks about how this new medium could guide the attention of the audience. But the stage cannot help us. The art of the theater has its limits. Here begins the art of the photoplay. That one nervous hand which feverishly grasps the deadly weapon can suddenly, for the space of a breath or two, become enlarged and alone visible on the screen, while everything else has really faded into darkness. The act of attention which goes on in our mind has remodeled the surrounding itself. The detail which is being watched has suddenly become the whole content of the performance, and everything which our mind wants to disregard has been suddenly banished from our sight and has disappeared. The events without have become obedient to the demands of our consciousness. In the language of the photoplay producers, it is a close-up.
Sure.
The close-up has objectified in our world of perception
Such a
our
good movie.
mental act of attention, and by it has furnished art with a means which far transcends the power of any theater stage. The close-up is an external shot. It's not from the perspective of a character, but it can be used to show the audience what a character is focusing on. It's still in the first person, even though it's not literally in their point of view. There's also a whole section about people debating whether this new medium counts as being art. So it's good to see that some debates
never
are
change.
eternal. I promise we're getting back to video games very soon.
Which is what I was about to say. Like, I think this was an interesting quote, but at the same time, again, like, you know, be it for books, be it for movies or plays, and you know, everything, like the definition of what, like, you know, first, second, third person would be is very different. Like video games be its own thing. First and foremost, because first, like everybody playing it will, like if you're playing a first or third person game, you generally will control the camera yourself.
With me. The reason why I bring this up is that camera angles and pronouns are completely different sets of communication tools that we can use, and it seems weird to me that we're mapping this first person, second person, third person linguistic term onto specific camera angles. In filmmaking, the terms first person camera and third person camera aren't really used. Camera angles from a person's perspective are called point of view shots.
Yeah, POV.
And what we call a third person camera in video games can be used to enhance a first-person narrative. The film Oppenheimer, for example, is split into two sections. The parts in color are written to be from the perspective of Oppenheimer, while the black and white sections are third person. The screenplay reflects this. Oppenheimer turns, heads back up the hill. Strauss. This is one of the most prestigious appointments in the country. Oppenheimer turns back at Strauss, grins. Oppenheimer. With a great commute. That's why I'm considering it. I clean up as Blackett and the other students leave. One leaves an apple for Blackett, green with stem and tiny leaf. I pause at a bottle, potassium cyanide, clumsy hand shaking. I draw cyanide into a syringe. I inject the apple. While the color sections are in first person, the only shot literally from the perspective of Oppenheimer himself is this one. Besides that, every shot is a external camera, but they're still based on his first-person perspective, what he remembers about the events as they unfolded, the close-ups when he's under pressure, and the abstract cutaways to show us how he's visualizing physics in his head. Insert cut. A young me, 21, lies in bed staring up, crying. Particles with the vastness of stars move like fireflies. Most films have first-person or third-person narratives. The second person is more rare. A second-person narrative would be something like an instructional video directly talking to the audience, or a fourth wall break. In these cases, the camera angle is just shot at a character looking through the camera at the audience. So maybe that's a second-person camera when it's shot like a window for the first person to directly address you.
Go home.
Alternatively, what about this scene in 2001: A Space Odyssey, where Hal is reading the lips of the crew? It's a point-of-view shot from a side character looking at the main character. By the internet's definition, this is second person,
right?
I guess. Or
I agree with that.
Isn't, because while Dave is the main character, you're not controlling Dave, so it's not looking at you, it's just another character's first-person perspective. But what if you were the main character?
And again, like, I get the point, but yeah, I think the problem is that he's talking too much about movies. Like, video games is very different, so like a lot of the points here feel like, you know, they get lost because on a video game concept, you know, it's different. I don't know. I mean, let's see what it is to say for the rest.
In the 1900s, a new technology was created that could enhance video, the video game. Now artists had access to an interactive medium. While second-person narratives are rare in films, they're actually extremely common in an interactive medium. What does a second-person video game look like? Baldur's Gate 3. Throughout the game, the text and narrator addresses you.
The blood in your
I guess you're right, I didn't think of that. Baldur's Gate 3 counts in a sense.
Blood obscures who you are. Your head throbs.
Like, in a way, it's... Yeah, you're right, I didn't think of that. Baldur's Gate 3 is actually a second-person game in a sense, right? You are looking... like, your view is almost more or less like from above. There's always this narration going on, which, you know, implies that this view from above is from like an actor's perspective, like a proper like D&D campaign, right? Like, you know, this is like a stylized visualization of what people are actually seeing on the table. Fair enough. So I guess, yeah, this counts. I mean, I guess then, you know, what I would say is that second person can be a lot of things. I don't think we should just define it to one thing then.
And your skin tingles. Visions rush past. A dragon's wing, a silver sword.
Les ailes.
And a flash of your face, seen through the strange woman's eyes.
And if you think about it, pretty much every game addresses you directly to give instructions. This new medium of games allows for information to pass both ways and have the art react to the second person. With this came a whole new language and furnished art with a means which far transcends the power of any film. We needed new words to describe these new tools. At some point in the development of computer graphics, we decided to call point-of-view cameras first person and external cameras third person. The oldest reference to this I could find was an advertisement for the game Battlezone in 1980, where you played from the perspective of a tank. This camera angle was sold as being more immersive, a way for you to experience what it's like being in a tank. Invoking the feelings of first-person narration made some sense. It's interesting that in games, point-of-view shots are immersive, but in films, they're gimmicky. Like Hardcore Henry,
that's such a
all
good movie.
The marketing for that movie was about how it looks like a video game, and the experience of it is fun, but I wouldn't call it immersive. The first movie to be completely point-of-view shots was a detective.
Does it not? What do you mean you don't call it immersive? I'm not sure what he means, but I recommend that movie.
Film in 1947 called Lady in the Lake. And okay, just look at how they tried to explain this concept to audiences at the time.
Striking an officer, resisting arrest, and murder, all on Christmas Eve.
Ah, you're the bad guy?
You'll see it just as I saw it. You'll meet the people, you'll find the clues, and maybe you'll solve it quick, and maybe you won't. You think you will, eh? Okay? You're smart.
It's you. They're saying that this is your perspective. It's a point of view shot, and they're using it as a second person.
And I never imagined there would be such an old piece of media with this idea of, you know, the POV. Okay.
Narrative device. Are you confused yet? I am, and I'm about to make it more confusing. The problem with using person perspectives in an interactive medium is that the three people are kind of blurred together. Think about how you describe watching a movie to a friend. I just watched the Mario movie last night. In it, Mario drove on Rainbow Road, and then they fought Bowser in New York. Now think about how you describe playing a game to a friend. I was playing Mario 64, and I swung Bowser by the tail into a ball. I'm talking in the first person, even though it's a third person game. Or maybe it's second person because Lakitu's filming you and that's another character. I'm talking in the first person, and I'm not Super Mario. Remember, in first person fiction, we pretend this character is the first person. Video games invite you to be the first person, to become the character in the story. When you're playing Mario, you are Mario. You are John Duty. And with VR, you can even look down.
By the way, Hardcore Henry looks like a GoPro film, and its fast-paced action takes away from the way we see fast-paced action with our own eyes. Sure, like, it's not perfect, but like first-person game are the same thing, right? Like, no one would say that most first-person game really feels like how you see things in real life. Like, you know, first-person shooters are a great example. Like, everybody says that there's always like, you know, the camera is actually like at a weird place to make the holding of a gun look right, even though it wouldn't really be like that in real life. So, you know, games themselves kind of failed the actual like human-like first-person point of view, right?
At your hands, puppeting the hands of the character like you're literally in their body. You temporarily suspend your own identity as the second person to experience the art as the first person. And that's really the goal of language, isn't it? To share knowledge between people, to step into someone else's shoes, to be like John Tanner hopping into other people's bodies, driving their cars around San Francisco, to become a more empathetic and rounded person.
Okay, we're going deep now.
Oh, unless the first person doesn't want you to see everything. In this scene at the end of the second chapter of Deltarune,
spoiler, I haven't read it.
Chris rips out a heart and locks it under the sink. This heart is you, the player, the person that's been controlling Chris throughout the game. Chris jumps out the window, and we don't see where they go. The camera stays in the bathroom. You overhear a conversation in the other room. This is a exterior top-down perspective camera shot, and it's in the perspective of the second person. So maybe the camera perspective of another character looking at the player character does count as second person, since the player is assuming the identity of the first person in the game, but wouldn't that mean all third person shots are also second person? Maybe all 9 of these camera shots I described throughout this video as possibly being second person are second person because that was their intention, to be a second person narrative. Okay, after all this rambling, here is my final take. I think using the terms first person, second person, and third person to describe different camera angles just doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. Maybe we should drop this terminology altogether. We have other ways to describe these camera angles.
I mean, I get the point, but it's not gonna happen. Like, people have been using that for decades now. The problem is it's not gonna happen, so we really need to define what the second person game is, because no one, I mean, actually no, it's not true. Rather than dropping the idea of first and third person, I guess we could come up with, like, if there's one game that really makes it make sense to people, we could come up with a new term for like what, you know, the equivalent of like second person per se, right? But I'd be surprised, yeah. Like, it's just much easier. Like, they just would need like to be one game that's massive and that people automatically look at and understand why it would be a second-person game per se.
Instead of a first-person shooter, we could call Call of Duty a point-of-view shooter, POV shooter. Instead of a third-person shooter, we can call Gears of War an over-the-shoulder shooter, and we already do that.
Yeah, we do that.
Hotline Miami has a top-down camera. Resident Evil has a fixed camera. The mission in Driver San Francisco, we could call that an NPC camera. This game I'm prototyping, maybe we call it a camera network, a network of cameras. I don't know. I'm still workshopping that one. I don't know. I feel like I've gone pretty deep into the rabbit hole here. I'm now suggesting that we shouldn't use the term first-person shooter anymore. So maybe this is a bad take, but...
Well, I don't know if it's a bad take. Like, I do see the point. Like, the idea of first-person, second-person comes from movies, books, all that. I guess no one had a better idea when video games started being a thing, and video games at first were like, you know, no one had really idea where it was going. So, you know, I get why we use this term. Maybe by now, like, they're kind of restrictive in what people think, but people are used to it, so, like, it'd be one out of a job to change them. So I get the point. I get it's a bit of like, changing the term would make describing things a lot more easier, but I don't think it's gonna happen. Do you play strategy games? Would you play one on stream? Sure, yeah. Well, I would play one on stream, but no, I don't play a strategy game. Well, depends what you mean by strategy game. Like, I've considered streaming Napoleon Total War, if that counts. That's about it.
I don't know, what do you think? What do you think, huh? This CCTV
Me or the third
is
person?
not the game idea I was trying to build towards when I started this game dev series, but playing around with it is so much fun, and I kind of want to turn it into a short game. And I also think it would be nice to work on something way shorter in scope after the massive project that Kid and Burst was. Just something like really focused, like Iron Lung. I see you. Have you finished eating? Do you need to watch another video? Here's another one of mine. You can watch this one. Or that one in the sidebar that you've been eyeing the whole time.
Okay.
Bye.
Also, Knight's apartment or whatever it is. This looks like a nice place. Well, good video. I don't know if I fully agree, but clearly this is one of those topics where, like, I don't think there's any right answer right now. Turn-based is what I know it as, which you could say, you know, there's a strategy to turn-based gameplay, but I think strategy games like either Total War or like Civilization, stuff like that. Yeah, I don't know. Like, it's a turn-based RPG. Well, it's not really an RPG actually. I mean, kind of is. Yeah, I guess it is. Okay, yeah. I mean, it's an interesting topic. I think, you know, the simplest thing about this is that we just need a game that everybody will, you know, a game that comes out, that become popular, and when we look at it, you know, people instantly understand that this is what, you know, what a second-person game would be like. Because again, I don't think we're gonna really change the language of what we call different type of game. It's interesting. It's interesting. Okay, well, this is some food for thought. Very interesting. Yes. Please consider watching the video before leaving a comment. Yeah. You know what YouTube should add? Like, you should have, like, I mean, I don't know if a lot of YouTubers would do it, because a lot of YouTubers, they want more comments, obviously, for the algorithm, but something about, you know, like some kind of option where, like, people can't comment until they watch, like, 90% of the video or something. That would be an interesting feature. If you want to play Total War Napoleon, sure, it's a bit outdated. I mean, recently I was, like, you know, looking if there was any good Napoleon game, and there's a lot of games, but most of them look pretty terrible, except Total War Napoleon. Even though it's like 15 years old or something, it seems to be the only one that's, you know, kind of alright. There's also, like, you know, Mountain Blade. There's a Napoleon mod. I think it's called March of the Eagle. I might play that at some point. I used to be addicted to Mountain Blade. But yeah. Okay, interesting video. Interesting topic. I don't know. Like, now that I think about it, you know, I was saying, like, yeah, Baldur's Gate 3, I guess, counts in a sense. Misclick, Phantom Cheetah. But I still can't fully look at it as, like, you know, when I think of Baldur's Gate 3, I still don't really think like second person to me. I don't know. I just think of it as like not a person, and yeah, like literally a genre, like top down D&D game, basically. I don't know. Okay, well, that was definitely food for thoughts, and we are thinking.